Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Stakeholder Whispering Live. My name is Bill Shander, and we are here to talk about stakeholder whispering. Not the book, but the idea. But yes, I wrote a book called Stakeholder Whispering, and the basic gist of the book is, I'm sure some of you know by now, and actually the subtitle says it, uncover what people need before doing what they ask. The basic idea is our stakeholders, our bosses, our clients, our whoever, ask us to do things, and often they don't really know what they need. So we have to help them figure it out. It's like therapy. As always, I have a guest with me today, Ollie Hughes, who is the CEO and co-founder of a company called Count. I'm going to let Ollie introduce himself. But Ollie, thank you so much for being here today. And yeah, why don't we start off with you telling us a little bit more about yourself?
Hey, Bill. Thanks for having me. Yes, I'm a CEO and one of the co-founders of Count.co. We're like the first and I think only kind of canvas-based BI tool. So we're a kind of an infinite whiteboard, collaborative whiteboard as your main interface for working in BI and doing reporting. And we're based broadly out of London. The core idea is, why is a BI tool such an expensive way to just get charts? It should be a place that you see your business clearer and collaborate and solve problems with your business. And that's what we're all about. So we're offering data teams a way to serve the business in a much deeper, more collaborative and more clear way than a traditional dashboarding tool.
Very cool. And for those of you who are not familiar with the term canvas-based or even like
Yeah,
BI tool, if you know Figma, right? Or if
yeah.
the whiteboarding tool Miro, basic idea, it's like this endless space in your web browser. You can sort of spin around and scan it and move it, things over here, there, everywhere. And you can have all kinds of different objects on there, text, images, whatever. But in Count.co's case, it's charts and graphs. It's like a dashboard, but an endlessly expandable space. It's a really cool idea. I really like it.
Thank you.
Before we
Yeah.
got started, Ollie and I were talking a little bit about building houses and all the decisions you have to make and how you just sometimes just want to just give me the normal thing. As Ollie said, give me the normal faucet. Just I don't want to make a decision about the faucet, which kind of ties into what we're here to talk about today. Like how you have to make all these decisions. What do you really want or need in your house? I don't know. In fact, I use that as an example in the book a lot. But Ollie, I know that when you were sort of coming up with the idea for your product, you and your co-founders, that the basic idea was people have plenty of tools to make dashboards and to make things out of data. They have Excel, they have Tableau, they have Power BI. I think we have all these. What more tools do we possibly need? But you found this need, but maybe not because people asked you for it. Tell us a little bit about how that really happened.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. No one, as you pointed out, not everyone knows what a canvas even is. So they certainly weren't saying, look, I'm looking for a canvas-based BI tool. So that's the solution to a problem that we had to identify, work through with people in the market and then work out this is the right solution. And really, it's one of those things where if you ask someone in data, ask an organization, like, what are you trying to do with your data? What are you trying to achieve? They will give you the right answer, which is that we're trying to make the business grow. We're trying to make the business better. We're trying to achieve their desires, their overarching needs are very clear, but they don't know the solution to get there better. And what we realized was that when we spoke to the businesses, particularly data teams, about what their challenges were in their BI tools, they would speak to things like ad hoc requests. Like, we just keep being asked questions by our stakeholders. They actually have to do their own, stakeholder whispering to understand exactly what businesses their stakeholders want. And they would look at the very painful. They want a solution which is very, painful to them. Like, I have too many ad hoc requests. I'm constantly trying to firefight how to make sure my data is accurate. And this is a very clunky, expensive tool I'm paying for. And I keep being my BI tool vendors keep charging more and more for what I doesn't feel like a lot of value, but they don't know the solution. And I think where we got to with this was realizing that their desires to grow the business were great, but they were looking at a lot of the requirements we were hearing were very in the tactical solution. Like, how do I stop having so many ad hoc requests? And that's fine. You can absolutely, a lot of people try and solve that problem with, simpler tools to use and let people explore data themselves. I think the inventive leap we went for was to say, the problem here is that the interface, the ability for a data team and their stakeholders to talk together, work together, doesn't exist in a BI tool. A BI tool is just a website with numbers on it. It's a grid of charts. What we need is a place where stakeholders can collaborate with the data team to really unpick what's going on. And that was the innovative leap, was saying, I understand all your pain points, but rather than solving those individual pain points individually, let's step back and look at the bigger picture of what you're trying to get done and realize that your workflow is broken. And then, simply looking at where is there great collaboration, what kind of software paradigm do you see collaboration working really well? And you pointed out tools like Figma, Miro, for different use cases, different domains. There's a natural workflow of collaboration, for clarification, for problem solving in that kind of Canvas interface. And so our thing was, what happens if we put the analyst in there to build in this Canvas collaborative environment and then bring the stakeholder with them? How much that value how does that unlock the value? Does that solve their pain and their overarching design? So that's kind of the
Yeah.
journey. We're sort of listening to their discrete pain points, but then stepping back and thinking about what's the wider problem here, the wider context that these really painful pain points are coming up in, and what's the solution that solves all of this in one go.
Yeah. I love that. And there's so many important lessons in there. And one of the lessons is what I tell people all the time, particularly data workers, no one cares about the data. No one cares about the data. The data serves a purpose. And the business, the only reason they care about the data is because it's going to help them, as you said, achieve their goals, growing their business, improving their, the productivity or whatever it is. No one cares about the actual data. So stop focusing on the data, focus on what the data is saying. And then the second thing, yeah, the collaboration is such a key part of that, because there's always that disconnect between the data analyst and the business, and getting them to actually talk together and figure out what they really need and how do we actually deliver it to you. And usually they ask for something, the business, data analyst goes away and 2 months later comes back with that fancy dashboard they spent, all that time building. And there's, that waterfall process doesn't work. A more iterative process can be better, but yeah, there's all the stuff that happens. But if you can actually collaborate in real time in an environment like count.co, that it does make sense to me. So like, do you remember the moment, or was there even a single moment where you realize, especially on that collaboration side? I think the other part is a little bit easier for people to understand. Business needs solutions, not data, but the data is going to help them get to it. We all
Yeah.
know that that's the real issue. But figuring out the collaboration was the key. Was that like a particular conversation when you were suddenly like, oh my God, aha, like we need to create a tool where they can collaborate? Or did that sort of happen more slowly and or organically?
I think that was part of it was actually that we had a previous product which was a different, it wasn't a canvas, it was more like a Word document with SQL in it. It was more of a kind of canvas document based BI tool.
Like a
And
notebook?
like a notebook, yeah, notebook, exactly.
Yeah.
And we were working with our tool internally, like we were drinking our own champagne, as I like to say, and realizing that we were working in our tool and then going to Figma or Miro to collaborate and problem solve on our own business. We were like, why are we working in two tools here? Why? We know the power of collaboration. We put these things together. Let's go test this with customers and then do that validation loop with them. But the real moment I knew we got it was when we saw our customers preferentially switching out of the notebook solution, because we used to run them, used to be able to pick between a notebook and a canvas.
Mhm.
And we saw our customers moving their usage over to the canvas. They were preferentially choosing the canvas to collaborate because whether they could explain it or not, they nascently felt the collaboration was a much faster, more value-added workflow. And so we just turned off the notebook and we just did that kind of A/B test for a while to know that was the
Okay.
right way of working it and know it was right. And then it was just hearing the stories and getting feedback and seeing that kind of, one of the metrics we really care about is how many collaborative sessions are happening on the platform. How many times as an analyst and a stakeholder in the canvas, both building together, building a dashboard, maybe building a dashboard at the same time. So the stakeholder and the analyst is owning this asset together, building requirements, iterating, thinking the problem through, not just waterfall development by the analyst and hoping it's good enough to the stakeholder where they don't know how it's been built at all. So that was really it. It was
Yeah.
that kind of that moment of like data world, business world in the same tool working together and being like, that is what we want. That's the ideal. That's the fastest way to value from data, is if you've got two people working through it together.
Yeah. That makes sense. And of course, in a tool like Tableau, that literally can't happen because there's too many features you have to understand, too many technical constraints. Whereas, yeah, a canvas-based thing, it's click and drag, mock it up, and then go from there. Um, I know that you also have a sort of a framework, a way of describing and thinking about how data teams can collaborate with the
Mm,
business. Um,
yeah.
Tell us a little bit more about that,
It,
because I think
well,
it's an
it kind of
important
fell
part
out
of
at
the
the same
lesson.
time as building the product and thinking through what makes this product valuable. How do you help a data team serve the business better? We were also thinking of the bigger question here, which is like, what actually is the value of a data team? What makes a data team valuable? Which data teams are working in a more valuable way than others? Yeah, as we're discussing, stakeholder whispering, obviously, a lot of data teams are operating like a support function. They're there trying to serve stakeholder requests, and really the value they can bring to the business is kind of capped by the requests they get asked, right? If you get asked a silly question, the amount of value that silly question is by answering is low. If you get asked a great
Yeah,
question, the ability for you to really drive value with the way you answer it is very high. So if you're working in a relationship which is very parent child is the kind of psychology term, where you're just doing what you're told, you're subservient, you're rate limited by the questions and the person you're serving. What you
yeah,
want to get to is a relationship with partners. And so we were thinking all this stuff through while building the product, which is what is the ways that data teams can be more valuable? How do you get out of this support trap? How do you get out of this support function where you're just constantly on a hamster wheel of just answering requests and building reports and reports? And we came up with these four pillars of a data team's value. And then we've obviously then taken those four pillars and then applied them to our product strategy into the canvas in Count. And the four pillars are quite simple, really. That, as I say them, one is called operational clarity. That a data team who is um, operating in a service support function is just flooding by just doing what the business asks them. They're just flooding the business with information. They're causing chaos. They're causing all
yeah,
these different reports. They're not helping the business understand itself. Whereas the best data teams are the ones creating what we call operational clarity. They're creating the simplest understanding of the business they possibly can. Because the simpler the business is or feels, or the clearer the business is about what's going on, the better context they're working in, the faster they can work, and the more informed they are to ask the data team better questions. They're not asking
yeah,
questions like what's going on or I don't understand, questions which are more about, just awareness. They're asking questions which are about getting to value faster. So that's one
yeah,
of the pillars, is this operational clarity. The second principle is more understandable, which is problem solving. How can a data team be leading solving the most difficult problems in the business rather than just providing data to help someone else think about the problem? The best data teams are the ones who are actually structuring the problem solve for their stakeholders. So rather than, the way of putting it is, who is solving the problem? Is it being solved in the head of an executive who's got back-to-back meetings every single day and is trying to think through this problem in their head and just asking for bits of information and trying to form a picture in their mind? Or is it better to be solved by the analyst who understands what the executive's looking for, is helping structure the way to solve the problem, piecing together the business context and the data so that it's just as simple as possible for the executive whose mind is flooded to get to real clarity? And that's what a data team is so great at. It's problem solving. It's just, how do you make sure the business is using problem solving and working and using the data team for that purpose, not just a kind of a repository of data.
yeah.
Does it make
Not just
so far make
providing the
sense?
ingredients for that executive to make those
Exactly.
decisions in an
Yeah,
impossible
yeah, yeah.
way. Yeah,
Exactly. Not just ingredients, but actually helping to help the person cook, be the sous chef, helping them think through the structure of the issue. Um,
yeah,
the third principle is this idea of minimizing time to decision. So a lot of data teams, when they struggle to work with the business, can retreat and try and form like a much more transactional relationship and to deal with these ad hoc requests. But the best data teams are the ones who are thinking about the not just the data portion, but actually thinking about the decision making process and how can they help the business, make decisions faster, more confidently. Either that could be just automation, could be like, let's not even involve humans, or it could be the most strategic, knotty problems. How do we facilitate the right environments, the right workflow to help the business think clearer? And that can link very much with problem solving with an executive. And then the final value principle is simple. It's just measure yourself. You know, data teams often forget that their biggest cost line isn't their BI tool costs or their data warehouse costs. It's actually their payroll. So
Yeah.
how much time is a data team spending on solving problems which are actually going to lead to revenue growth, or like or help business improve, versus just doing day-to-day maintenance? And that's a really important. The more you're spending on the value add, the better. And I think we, as
Yeah.
data teams, the ones who are doing well, the ones who are thinking about that all the time, and not just building nice little projects which they feel, which have no impact to the business whatsoever, but make their world easier. They're focused on making the business more efficient rather than themselves more efficient. If that makes sense.
Yeah. That makes perfect sense. And the whole framework makes perfect sense to me. And what's funny about it is that, the way you're talking about it, it's all about data teams specifically, but the exact same argument can be made about all internal service providers in every company. IT more broadly, HR, marketing. They answer the requests of the rest of the executive team or whatever. They're the rest of the organization that's more like the revenue producing side. But they all want to be more strategic. They all want to be at the seat at the table so they can actually solve problems and help those people do what they need to do, not just simply answer ad hoc requests. So it's such a common issue in business. And
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
there are some specific nuances to it for data teams. But yeah, I mean, it absolutely rings 100% true. And all four of those pillars are great pillars. What's interesting about data is it is so technical. And so you have, as you said, the busy executive, they're trying to solve problems. They're just going to, hey, give me some data about X, Y, or Z. I'll figure it out. Um, but they're not statisticians. They don't know what type of data you have. They don't not know exactly how to phrase the questions they need to ask, which is why it's so valuable when the data team is there at the table providing that clarity as you describe it.
Yeah.
And even seeding the conversation with that initial views of the data, because the executive can come up with better questions when they can look at that canvas, I imagine, and see some things and say, oh, tell me more about that thing I saw over here.
Yeah.
Is that
If there's
part of it?
Sorry.
No, is that part of it?
Oh, totally. I mean, if there was anything which if I was to pick one of those four parts of the framework, the thing which I keep hearing again and again from our customers and just data people in general is this idea of operational clarity. This penny drop moment happens when they go, "Oh, right, I'm actually hurting my ability to serve the business by just producing stuff. If I keep just being on the treadmill of producing reports and charts and insights, actually I'm hurting the business because I'm making it more confusing, and I'm in this vicious cycle of asset production, of building
Yeah,
stuff. And I think that's hoping every time I make something, I'm hoping it's going to be useful. But over time, I'm just producing chaos and confusion. My goal is to be more elegant, and my goal is to, my main focus is clarity. The more I can
yeah,
serve stakeholders with clarity, the better. And that clarity comes in, like, I would say, there's a leading metric and a lagging metric. Back to those value frameworks. If an executive, yes, there's technical challenges there, but most of the executives are just flooded with cognitive load. Their brain is up to here with information at the lowest and highest level. If
yeah,
if you can help an executive by just clarifying the world, make their context, their world feel easier, even before they ask you a question, that is an enormous value add. And when we see people using Count, they often using it to build things like metric trees, just to like produce a kind of mental framework for what's going on in the business. How does the business fit together? And every time we see it, we see an executives like almost just relax. They're just like, oh, now I understand how this all works. I can just see my world on paper rather than it being held in my brain. Now I can ask smart questions. Now I can come to you better prepared to help us problem solve where it matters. And you can help me then structure the clarity around that problem solve too. So you can
yeah,
see clarity matters across the board. That's the probably of all of this, the primary goal is clarity,
yeah.
be that on
Well,
the
let me ask you
problem you're
this.
solving or the context.
Yeah, I'm going to ask you a tough question. So the tool sounds like it enables that in the way you've described it, which makes perfect sense to me. Um, but as I always say, tools are just tools, right? Like, I can make a bad tool do good stuff. I can make a good tool make a disaster, right? I'm sure you could contribute more confusion and lack of clarity, even in count, by overwhelming and making a canvas that's 800 meters wide and has 87 million different charts on it, et cetera. Um, so in addition to the tool potentially being used in a collaborative way to help solve problems because they're both at the table working together, is there anything special either about the tool or how you train people to use the tool or in how you talk about it or et cetera that makes even your average data analyst, the person who's not so good at the stakeholder whispering, does it force them to do that better? Almost. Tell me a little bit more. Like, because
Yeah,
I can imagine a data team that just doesn't think that way. They just want to execute on tasks. They get your tool, and they still doing the crappy job that they were doing before, just using your tool instead of Tableau or whatever. So to help us understand how that stakeholder
totally.
whispering might occur in that context.
Yeah, no, there's a few things there. So one of the things that gave me a lot of confidence about the framework is that we see data teams using it. And if they don't use our tool, like the framework of value and principles of clarity, you can use that. And if you are using Tableau, it's just harder. So it's
Yeah,
absolutely, the framework is, I think, universally true. And then we just believe it
100%.
enough to build a tool for it. In the tool itself, you're totally right. The canvases are flexible spaces. You can absolutely build anything. You can build, as you can in any tool, build things which make no sense at all. Um, the two get out of jail cards that we think particularly work well is, one is we give you templates, so you're guided, just like you need to be taught how to build a good dashboard if you're using a dashboard. Similarly, how to build a good metric tree. We give you the templates. You can then follow that structure through and get to that visualization of the business that a canvas is so uniquely good for. The second thing which the tool does, which is kind of just built in, but we see that as such a powerful mechanism, is the fact that it's collaborative. You have this iteration loop coming into a canvas which an analyst has been working for 3 days and trying to understand what they've done is difficult. Just like it
Yeah,
is to get a dashboard from after 3 days of work and understand what the dashboard means. The big escape valve is that if you can bring the stakeholders in early and show them you're working and build it with them, even a complicated thing, they're on the journey with you, and you're avoiding mistakes or avoiding confusion as you go. And that's been the big thing. It's the feedback loop iteration cycle that you get as you're working through it, which
yeah.
which really helps. So that's
I think it's
been
a great
the
point.
main thing. Yeah,
Yeah, it's a really important point because in the end we have to remember we're always creating an experience for somebody, that user experience. And even if you created what at first glance to a fresh set of eyes might be, God, that's a freaking nightmare. I don't even want to look at that thing. It's a disaster. But if that person who collaborated on it is the user, and they're able to glance at it and it makes sense to them, may
yeah.
not make sense to you, but if it makes sense to them, guess what? That's a success. And so, yeah, if they're actually involved in that process of building it, then guess what? It works. So, yeah, any
If
objective measurement doesn't matter.
in your book, I love your book, by the way, just to give a plug.
Thank
You
you.
talk about how knowledge work is really about UX. It's a design challenge, and really what we're talking about here is the person who's been on the journey building with you. They're in a kind of first user experience. They're working the problem with you, and
Yeah,
then once you've got to a conclusion, the other thing I should mention is that you can obviously then turn all your messy work, which is for that person building with you, makes total sense because just how they've been thinking. For the new user, the intermediate user who needs to consume the outcome, there's a presentation layer that you can switch to and hide all the messy work. So
okay.
there's that thing about it. There's two different UX journeys here. There's the person you're building it with, which may be the end user, or there's the person you're building it with, and then you want to publish it for the wider organization. And at that point, there are
Yeah,
a whole set of tools to make it a storytelling exercise rather than a problem solving exercise. So the
gotcha.
UX, that's why I love your book. You talk about it as UX, and I think that's absolutely the way to think about it.
Yeah, no, that's great. Well, this is great. Ollie, I want to thank you very much for being here. Before we go, any final words of wisdom, final words of advice, like, that little nugget of, boy, if you just do this, you're going to figure out what your stakeholders need from you, and help them solve their problems.
I think um, I think looking back to the framework we were discussing before, this idea of like what makes a data team, and as you rightly said, any team more helpful to their stakeholders. That the four pillars are really powerful: operational clarity, problem solving, time to decision, and measuring yourself. But of all of those, the thing which is probably the thing which we see again and again is the thing we could improve a lot is this idea of clarity. The clearer you can help your stakeholders be before they even ask you a question, the clearer, the simpler their world is, the easier you make their lives so they just understand what's going on. They'll come to you more informed. rather than
Yeah.
having to do loads of work as soon as they come to you, and you've got to do loads of work to give them clarity then. So there's a lot I think you can do to just recognize that everyone's busy. The clearer you can be in the way you work with someone, that the better off they're going to be. They're going to love you for the fact that of all the mess in their day-to-day world, you're the one who gives them clarity is only going to help. So clarity is a massive win in this information exploded world. I think that's
Yeah.
probably the nugget I'd leave you with.
I love it. And it's essentially it reduces the amount of whispering required, which is a good thing because whispering's hard. Well,
Yeah,
this is
exactly,
great.
exactly. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Well, Ollie, I want to thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate your sharing your experience and insights with our audience. And so, yeah, thank you very much.
Bill, it's been really great. Thank you for having me.
Excellent. And for everybody else, I'll be back again next week for another episode. We'll see you then. Bye bye.